Welcome to Miss V, the Storyteller podcast. You guys, it's 2024. And so we're going to have some amazing guests, and we're starting with an amazing guest. Her and I, we talk. Let me tell you all something. When I tell you that me and when I do meet and greets, we have meet and greets, and Nicole and I, we talked and we laughed, and she literally just said to me, I can listen to you all day because you are funny. And y'all know I am. And I thank God because God really replaced all the stuff that I had went through with pure joy and just craziness in a positive way. So I love stories. I love meeting new people. And today, Nicole is with us. Before we get into storytelling and telling stories, she is going to tell us a little bit about herself. So, Nicole, go ahead and tell us something about yourself. Share with us so we can get to know you.
Well, Valeria, thank you so much for having me on your broadcast. Or your podcast. I am extremely grateful, and I just want you to know that. So, a little bit about me. I come from the South, grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, and a Southern girl, raised real conservative, Bible Belt, had a lot of religion because my dad was Southern Baptist and my mother was Lutheran. So, spent a lot of time being confused about God because one church said one the other. But I grew up up until seventh grade in parochial schools, and then my parents put us in public schools, which was quite a transition in Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
Mississippi in the 70s. I will tell you now, my vocation is an Eternality Advocate. And my occupation for the previous almost 40 years, my career's been in wellness and lifestyle and preventative medicine. And the reason I went into that was because of my own health traumas and dramas and learning to manage my chronic conditions because of a near-death car crash I was in at 19. So that drove my career. But I've been privileged to work at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Air Force Medical Operations. I was head of all 87 Air Force bases, their nutrition manager. I have worked at hospitals. I was an oncology dietitian. I went into nutrition, got my advanced degree in nutrition because I had an eating disorder, and that resulted for not getting mental health. So I thought if I went into nutrition, I'd cure myself. Guess what? Don't work like that.
Mm.
But just back then, I didn't know. And then I became a wellness director, which I loved at a hospital, trying to get people well. I've worked at the American Cancer Society as a vice president, and I've had my own consulting business. I'm 100% disabled veterans, have the utmost respect for our veterans, and I'm just so sad that 22 veterans a day commit suicide. We can do better, America, for
Yeah.
them and for us. And I would say my biggest credential that I think is the most important out of all the alphabet letters after my name is BTDT. Do you know what that means?
What does that mean?
It means been there, done that. And I put it on my book. Okay. And people are like, I've never heard of that credential. Are you sure that's a certified one? I said, I don't care if it is or not, because going through something gives you empathy, sympathy, and compassion. And they don't teach that in school or graduate school. So I feel like that is my credential for having a near-death experience and coming back and being going through what I have gone through the last 40 years, as I have transformed from that a near-death experience into a spiritually transformative experience. So that's kind of a little bit about me. I'm married. I got married at 40. So all those of you who are still waiting and thinking that man's never going to show up, you just got to be patient, okay? And picky, okay? Because he did show up at 40, but I had to wait a long time. But we are happy, and we just adopted 2 Pekingese dogs and live in New Bern, North Carolina.
Wow, that's awesome. That is so great that you said that at the very end because I think women, we put age on things and God doesn't. God is like timing at the right time and not at the right age.
That's
So
exactly
you got
right.
yours at the right timing, because we do that as women, we put age on stuff, age to have kids, age to have a house, age and all that. So God is like, nope, that's not how I operate. So thank you so much for sharing that about yourself. I know you're going to be a little bit busy because at the beginning of the year, everybody's trying to do these nutrition and on these diets and do all these things. And then by March, it's like, it didn't work. So I know you're going to be busy helping people, which is great. Now, you all know that I love stories. I think that stories connect us and they help us to learn from each other because you will remember a story a lot faster than facts. So, what I try to do on my podcast is I have people to come on and just share their personal story so that we can learn and we can remember. Because you may not remember everything Nicole says, but most likely you will remember her story, especially if you can relate to it. So, with that said, Nicole, go ahead and share your story with us.
Well, Valeria, first of all, I want to say that this is not the easiest story for me to share, but I feel like it's very important to share. And it's it's a father-daughter relationship that was fractured and has never healed. And it has probably been, of all the injuries I've had and all the emotional pain I've suffered, it has been the most excruciating pain to understand that the relationship with my father is never going to be what I had hoped for, and that we don't talk to each other. And, it started probably when I was born. I was born a disappointment. I was 10 and a half pounds, 2 weeks late, and I was the second child of four. And he thought that I was going to be a linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys. And he could
Wow.
not believe a baby being that big would not be a boy. So he had the nurse go back and check a couple of times just to make sure he had the right baby. And so, you sense that actually in utero, if you're going to be, if your mother's stressed or if you're going to be wanted or not. So I think I knew at some level I was born a disappointment. My mother got pregnant immediately afterwards, and then the son came, who was named after my father. And so I kind of got pushed away.
Mhm.
You have the firstborn and then the boy. And so my dad was a Marine. He went to the U.S. Air Force Academy. He wanted one of his four siblings to follow in his footsteps. And I was trying to figure out my whole life, how do I get his attention? How do I get his love? How do I get his approval? And he was one about, you perform, and you perform at a very exceptional standard, at a high standard. So I will tell you, he had, growing up, we had his 10 commandments. Not only did we have God's 10 commandments, but we had my father's 10 commandments. And I mentioned this in the book, and I'm just going to go through them real quick, but you get an idea of my father. No
Well, let's hold
spending.
that to the end so we can get the story. And that
Okay.
way they can connect the two. So go ahead and share the story with us, and then we'll do those 10 because we'll save that to the end.
Okay. So, but very rigid, very dogmatically positioned. His way was the highway. He knew what was best for us. You never questioned him.
Mhm.
And so I learned that whatever he said to do, do it. And if you didn't get it right the first time, you were stupid, basically. There was something wrong
Wow.
with you. So there was just a lot of fear growing up when we did not do what we were told, or we somehow screwed up. We did get punished, and it was with a whipping with a belt. And so that was back in the 70s. And I thought other kids got treated the same way. I didn't know that there was something called a timeout or other ways. We just got a whipping, and it left bruises on us, and it
Mhm.
made an impression. And my dad actually instilled the fear of himself and God in me. So I lived in that what is it? Fight, flight, or fight,
Fight
flight,
or flight.
flight. Yes, and your amygdala, where you're just scared all the time of screwing up. So when I became a people pleaser, and I'm in recovery for that now, I can say, but that's how I tried to deal with my dad, is just doing whatever he said and to please him. When the crash happened at 19 at the Air Force Academy, I knew I was in the wrong place when I got accepted and got there. I was there for the wrong reasons. I had not a military bone in my body, but it didn't matter. I just wanted to please him. And he was so proud of me when I got accepted. And so I was in a motor vehicle crash where I was pronounced dead. my sophomore year, and they did revive me, and I spent 4 months in the hospital. And I'll never forget, the first thing I said when I came to was, don't tell my dad, he'll kill me. That's how much fear I had, because he had 3 rules about the academy: no dating, no drinking, and no smoking. And I was like, no fun then. And so by my sophomore year, I was like, okay, I'm going to have a beer, and this guy that I was getting a ride back to the academy with, I said, I'm going to have he's like, let's have a cigarette, let's stop somewhere. And then he wanted to make out. And I said, no. But my dad, when he found out that I actually admitted that, even though I wasn't driving, he blamed me because I broke his rules, and therefore I broke God's rules. And I lost his respect. I lost his love. I lost his praise. That was fractured right then at that moment. And I have spent the last 39 years trying to earn that respect back. And I have not been able to, because he has continually been steadfast in his pronouncement that I brought this on myself by disobeying him. And these are what happens. You suffer the consequences if you don't listen to your father. So 1.5 years ago, I really found out the truth about what happened. And my roommate, who I'd not spoken to for 39 years, her and I Zoomed, and she told me that she was the cause of the crash. We had agreed to go back together, and from this event that we were at. And when the time came to leave, she said, Nicole, I'm going to take this other cadet back. He's been drinking. They've all been drinking. I like him. I want to make out with him. There's one guy left. You go. And I said, but he's been drinking and I don't feel comfortable doing this. And she goes, Nicole, for once in your life, go have some fun. I'll see you back at the academy. And she didn't realize he had an agenda to stop at a bar and have a beer and a cigarette and wanted sex. And so I never made it back to the academy. And she wound up quitting the academy that Christmas because of the guilt she felt for not honoring the commitment she had to take me back with her. And she just said, if I would have just said, get in the car, our whole lives would have been different. And so when I told my father that, I don't speak to him frankly, but I thought that was an important thing that he should know. He actually told me it was still a bad decision and I should have walked from this park back 20 miles to the Air Force Academy at 7:30 on a Sunday night. So he is
Wow.
still rigid in his belief system. And when he said that to me, the hurt of my heart cracking and just going, after all these years, that's how you still feel about it, that I still made a bad decision that cost me my life. And I've suffered immensely because of it, that I should have walked back in the dark, no cell phones back then. So, it's been a layering process to unravel my relationship with him. I've been in and out of therapy, but lately I've learned to lay him to rest. Figuratively, not literally, and to realize that I've set a boundary. I don't have anything to do with him. I wish him well. I have no hate anymore. I can talk to his spirit form, but him and I have no relationship now. And it's very sad for me because growing up, I was taught that family was everything. They'd always be there for you. And, I didn't realize how conditional the love was and how mean that he could be, and how he just, when we were doing our pre-talk, you told me there was 2 rules with the Marines.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I was dating one briefly. And he said the first rule is that Marines are never wrong. And rule number 2 is refer back to rule number 1. Marines are never wrong.
So my dad was a Marine, and guess what? He's never been
He's
wrong.
never wrong.
No, remember the Fonz back in Happy Days? He could never say he was sorry. He would just get, he could just never say it. And so the same with my father. And when you said that to me, it really clicked that his entire life, he's never been able to admit he's wrong.
And
And
I'm not,
so
and when I tell you that, not to cut you off, I'm not saying all Marines. So if you're a Marine, you're out there, I'm telling you what a Marine said to me. And this was someone that I was we were potentially going to start dating, but that kind of shut down when he said that and a couple of other things. So I'm not saying all Marines, so don't be like, I'm not saying you. I'm talking about your friends. So go
Yeah,
ahead.
and back in the 60s, that probably was the motto and the belief system, that they don't everything is yes sir, no sir. There's no gray area. They don't know how to operate in a gray
But
area.
he was
And
young.
yeah,
He was young. He wasn't like, he was probably born in the 70s. You know what I'm saying? He was
yeah,
young. He wasn't like an older one, well, back in that time, but he wasn't. But I guess they instilled that into
yeah,
all of them,
yeah.
and some of them most likely take it to a different level.
Yeah. So, that has been really hard for me. And as a result, my mother and I relationship, it's fractured as well because she believes everything he says. She's very codependent with him and will support him with anything. So I've had to let the image of what a family should look like go and
Mm.
realize that when I came back, my mission was not to get along with my family and have them believe my experience on the other side. It was to help other people in their fear of death. And so, just because my family doesn't believe it doesn't mean that others won't believe it. And that was a belief system I had to let go of was, well, my family's not changing their behavior and they're not believing my story about what's on the other side. And so I realized, wow, just because they don't believe it doesn't mean others. And I've gotten so many wonderful, much feedback and reviews on my book that has helped people that have been struggling, that I said, oh, I knew I came back for that. It wasn't about my family of origin. It was for another mission. And Spirit was really clear that you're here to tell people not to be afraid of death. And it's not about your family and getting along with them and spending all this time and effort and energy with people that are not able or willing or just cannot give you what you need.
Well, I can relate to you as far as having some issues with my father. Me and my father, here now we are much closer than we've ever been. But it reminded me of a story. It reminded me of a story of something that happened to me. Me and my dad, probably about 20 years ago, we were, just trying. I always tried to have a relationship with my dad. That's what my mom has instilled in us when they divorced. She made sure that we bought Christmas gifts for our father, spent time on his birthday, which him and I share the same birthday. But
Oh,
yeah, we
wow.
share the same birthday. And so she always made sure that we, had a relationship with our dad. She never really talked bad about him. So anything that we got in our minds about our father came from him and not from her. Yeah, sometimes she would be frustrated at him on the phone when he was supposed to pick us up and he didn't show up, and left it up to her to explain to us what happened. So we would hear her arguing with him on the phone sometimes, but she never like sat in front of us and talked down about my dad. So my dad was dating this woman, and um she caused some issues between him and I. He didn't see it, but I saw it. And one day he called me and he told me I was no longer welcome in his home. And I was like, oh, okay. He really did hurt my feelings when he said that. And he said, because of the way you at that time they had gotten married, my wife. And I said, okay. After, he kept talking and I said a little bit of my piece and I felt like it was going on death's door. I didn't say anything. And then I said, okay. But what happened was when I said okay and I hung up the phone, I thought to myself, it was like a weight lifted off of me,
Yeah.
because I felt like now, if you want to have a relationship with your daughter, because you've closed that door, because your daughter kept trying and you allowed someone to put a wall up or close the door on that relationship. So if you want to have a relationship with me, you're going to have to do it because you've closed the door. And it was like a weight lifted. When I told my mom about it, my mother was hot, and they've been divorced forever. And she was hot. She was like, if I knew how to drive good, I would get in my car and I would kick his bleep. But then she circled back around as she would always do when it came to my dad, and she was like, "You know what? That's still your dad, and don't you even worry about it. It's not you." So I told my siblings, I told them what happened. I said, "Y'all go on over there, y'all do whatever, and don't let that block your relationship because of what he did to me." And I'm protecting my dad. But what happened was, because of that, he had to reach out to me. So he would call me. And then he called me one day and he said to me, he was like, "Hey, sugar, first of all, who you talking to on the phone? You just
Oh,
a couple of weeks
yeah.
ago, you told me I wasn't welcome over your house, and now you hate sugar. Who you talking to? Who you talking to?" But I didn't say anything. I was like looking at the phone, like, "Oh, me, sugar?" And he was like, "Hey, let's go out for lunch. I'll come and take you out to lunch." That was an olive branch. I was
Yeah,
like, "Oh, okay." And from that point on, he would call me, he would come to my house, we would go out to lunch, and now he calls and checks up on me, and it was like God allowed that to happen so that he could build a relationship with his daughter, because for years his daughter was trying to build a relationship with him, and he put the ball in his court. So this is the thing when I thought about your story, is simple and direct and to the point. Your father is going to come around because you've done everything you could to have a relationship, and if he doesn't, it's his loss, and it's totally and
yeah,
completely on him. So because of that experience, and when you look, and I love asking this question, because of that experience, when you go back and you look at, like, I look at it as like a movie. When I look back in my past and I look back over a certain part of the movie or certain part of the book, what was the biggest lesson that you learned from that experience? What was the biggest lesson for my dad? And I'll say mine real quick. For my dad, I had to give my dad back his issues. I was
yeah,
carrying his issues, and
yeah,
it was making it my issue, and it wasn't. That was him. He allowed that woman, because she was the woman he was cheating on with my mom. He allowed her to come into his life and wreck it. And it was, all of this was on him. It wasn't on me. And it
yeah.
wasn't my responsibility. But as children, that's what we do. So I had to learn not to take on other people's responsibility, where my dad's responsibility.
Yeah, I think you make a big point there is when someone won't acknowledge their responsibility that they did something wrong and own up to it. If you're an empathic, sympathetic person, you take it on because something went wrong here. And if the other person's not owning it, then you own it, especially if they're telling you you screwed up. So it took me a long time to unwind from that and realize that my dad connected himself and God together. So not only did I disappoint my father on earth, I disappointed my father in heaven. So it made me have to reconceptualize God and also to after years and years and years of holding out a little bit of hope that maybe my dad's going to change or maybe he's going to come around, that hope caused me more migraines, I think, than I
Mm,
realized, instead of being able to just say no. And if something happens, let it be a miracle and a gift, but to realize this is who he's been his whole life and to accept it and to trust that I've got to move on with the remainder of my life,
mhm,
let it go. I not wish any, I
mhm.
wish them love. They live in
Right.
Australia, I don't have to interact with them, but it's just sad and it hurts that I tried so hard and it really wasn't even about me.
Right.
And I think that was the lesson that you get is,
Mhm.
wow, you think it is your fault at some level and it wasn't,
It was
and
not.
yeah, and so that's the hardest thing is and taking on someone else's emotions, their energy, and their responsibility because they won't admit the truth.
So with all of that, because when we go through a lot, and when we go through a lot of emotional things, what did you do with it? Like for me, I started my story. I was doing my storytelling, but then I started my podcast and I started to share stories on my podcast. So that's what I did with all those experiences, negative and positive. I journal, I wrote a book, I did all these things because I wanted to get all this stuff out, but I also wanted to use that to help other people. So, what did you do with because I think as women, we all have to do something. Some people write, some people journal, some people, they do all these different things to get it out. So what did you do?
Well, first of all, I want to say don't go into a trance. Okay. And when I
Hmm.
say a trance, that means don't go into binge watching, overeating,
Hmm.
over drinking, overspending, because that just takes you away from the issue. You've got to confront this and you've got to deal with it, and you're going to probably need help with it. So reach out and
Yeah.
start, get a qualified person to help you unravel the issues, because the issues are in the tissues, and you're going to start having
Hmm.
physical issues if you don't deal with these emotions. So I'm like you. I wrote my book. It took me 13 years to write it. That really helped me. And then I did the Audible, and I didn't realize, Valeria, that when I did the Audible, I narrated it myself. Speaking my voice,
Hmm.
12 chapters worth, was really powerful, sent me back to therapy, because all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, I spoke my truth.
Hmm.
Then I had to listen to myself telling my story. And then it really embodied. It wasn't just in my head anymore. It was in my body. Oh my God, Nicole, look what you have been through. Look how courageous you are. Look how resilient your spirit is. And look at what you have done. You have changed your life. You've taken this experience and you are being authentic. You're sharing your truth. Not every family is this magical, wonderful. We all come in here to learn, and it's not, Norman Rockwell family pictures. We all have lessons to learn, and sometimes it requires boundary setting where you have to actually cut off the relationship because it's making me sick. It makes you sick. If you dread that call from your mother or your father, or they don't ask about you, or just they judge you, they criticize you every time you get on the phone. No, you don't have to put up with that anymore.
Absolutely. Love it.
And I think we forget that we're always seen as my parents as in that child role. Even if we're 59 years old, you're still seen as a child, and they know better and they can
Hmm.
tell you what to do, instead of, no, I'm an equal, I'm an adult, and if we can't have a respectful conversation, then I'm leaving. I'm not going to sit here and listen to you continue to berate me.
Well, great. I love it. And I love that you put your story in writing so that it can help people. So tell us the name of the book, where we can get it from. So if someone's out there and they relate to your story and they're like, oh my God, I want to read more, where can they get that information in the book?
Okay, so the book is available, and here it is. You Are Deathless, a near-death experience taught me how to fully live and not fear death. And it is on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and you can order it through your independent bookstore. It's also Kindle, it's on Audible, on my website, www.nicolekerr with a K.com. I have all the images in the book, including the image of the
Mm.
car, and you can see that looks unsurvivable. That was a 65 Corvette convertible, and I didn't survive. I was clinically dead 10 to 13 minutes. And my angel, who is an EMT, I have
Hmm.
several angels, he revived me. So you can also email me on my website. I have a contact form. I'll send you the first chapter for free. But mostly, Valeria, I want this to become a book club book, because we
Okay.
are a country of death denial. We don't think it's going to happen to us. We do not prepare like for other transitions in life. We take time and prepare weddings, birth of a child, but this is the only common experience that's shared by 8 billion people on this planet. We are all going to pass away. This physical vessel is going to die and decay, and our soul is going to go onward. And so there's book club questions in here. There's a fear checklist of what you might be afraid of in terms of death. But I will tell you, your beliefs about God shape your relationship with death. So that's a really key component. I had to reevaluate and reconceptualize God, because my experience going to the other side is God is love. Period. End of sentence. It's not about fear. And if you look into the 1600s, what the word fear meant was awe and reverence. It's changed now, but every
To
near-death
negative.
experience, yeah, every near-death experiencer that I've talked to, their experience was one of awe and reverence in the presence of God. And so it's,
Well, I think this is great because not only now, listening to what you just said, it's not only a good read, but it's also a resource that you can
yes,
use it as a resource. And I love that. So thank you so much for coming on, but thank you also for sharing your story and the book, because I'm realizing I'm listening to you and I'm like, that is a great resource. And like
yeah,
you said, a book club, or if your family can read it, and if they're having struggles. So please, you guys, go out. I will make sure everything is in the show notes. Please make sure you download, get the information. She's giving you the first chapter for free, so take advantage of that. Go out and support her and buy the book. So thank you again, Nicole, for
thank
being
you.
here. You have been just such a blessing to us, so thank you.
Oh, thank you, Valeria. And same to you. You keep doing the wonderful light worker that you are.